locations. So we started out, where did we start out?
We started at Cumbria Crystal.
Cumbria Crystal?
Yeah.
No. The first.
Well, we know. Then we went to Blackwell, which was the Arts and Craft House.
So Blackwell for the Arts and Craft House, and we did about 15-20 minutes of interview there.
Yeah.
And then we got on a bus and went to see some amazing other places. Playdale. And so we're now at the second part of the interview. Nigel's trying to get away, but he will not get away. So the second part of relevant conversations with Nigel Lockett. Is that the right way to pronounce it?
It is good.
Just to recap, Nigel is an entrepreneur. Well, he's an academic entrepreneur.
Yeah.
It's a good way to describe him. You run a business with your brother for about 10 years.
Yeah.
24 million turnover.
Yeah.
Sold that business. Works as the head of entrepreneurship and strategy.
Yeah, entrepreneurship. Yeah.
Head of entrepreneurship at Lancaster University in the UK, and they've got a lovely campus. So if you can, you should always. Yeah. So where were we? You were talking about how you got into academia after you had sold.
That's right.
Your business.
Yeah, by accident, I think, wasn't it? Yeah, and I think we got to the point. I was just explaining that. Then I started my PhD, which was all about the use of information systems. Let's say, ICT. We called it e-business for short, but the use of e-business by small businesses. Because certainly in I would say in Europe, particularly, in Europe, what we noticed was that even though the internet was growing a lot in the 2000s, small businesses were adopting only what I would call low complexity applications, things like email. They weren't getting involved in the really complex sort of ERP, CRM, that type of technologies. But we identified groups of the SMEs who were at very high levels. So my PhD was looking at what we called e-aggregations, which was what had to happen for SMEs who traditionally were not engaging in these applications. Why did we find groups that were? So groups of dairy farmers or independent contractors or other people who were using quite complex hosted applications. And of course, now in 2018, we all talk about cloud computing as if we'd always had our head in the clouds. But in 2001, 2, 3, 4, 5, hosted applications, cloud computing was still very novel. So finding groups of SMEs that were small businesses that were using these was quite a novel thing. So my PhD was all about investigating that and what the ingredients that made that come about. And I think we found something really interesting, which I can share with you.
Yes.
Which was if you look at the business model for hosted applications or cloud computing or software as a service, whatever you want to call it, it's predicated on the idea that the reason it can be done at a cost-effective price, traditionally maybe 15-10% the price of buying software, you could rent that software equivalently annually for say 10%, which is significant when you think that that's likely to be changed anyway. So what that's predicated on is what you have one application that many people will use. So that's great, and that keeps the price down. The problem is the sales model was one-to-one. So you had a business model predicated on delivery at a one-to-many, but a sales model which was one-to-one. So it was never really cost-effective for firms to build applications for small firms, so some of the software houses, because they couldn't sell it economically. So what we found is that actually in certain cases, if you had a certain type of intermediary who did the selling, you then had the system developer would sell to the intermediary. The intermediary would then sell to the SMEs. So the software house's model was one-to-many delivery, one-to-one who would then do the one-to-many. So it was then economically viable to build the application and then to sell seats on the application.
Who are these intermediaries? Which would that be co-ops? Or
well, that's a good thought. It would be things like trade associations,
right.
or even in some cases agricultural college. We came across an agricultural college in Scotland that had a network of dairy farmers.
Right.
So somebody then built an application which was for managing dairy nutrition,
right.
Which they then worked in partnership with the college who had the network.
Right.
So that way, suddenly, you had a one-to-many sales model which matched the one-to-one, one-to-many sales model which matched the one-to-many delivery model. And we saw it in all sorts of different industries.
Right.
So that was my PhD.
That was your PhD.
Yeah, so that was a digression.
No, fair enough. So how long have you been in Lancaster then?
Well, actually, Lancaster now for just over 2 years.
Okay.
And prior to that, most recently at Leeds, where I was professor of enterprise at Leeds for 6 years.
Right.
And was responsible for managing a specialist group around enterprise education and then a university-wide project on enterprise. Because that's my big passion, if I'm honest, is how enterprise can change lives in a really positive way. It's not all about making money, it's about generating wealth that can be distributed, and I think that's a good thing to do.
That's always a good thing. Right, let's put a pin in the academic path, and let's go back to, so you have, is it a blog called The Dyslexic Professor?
Yeah, so that was just was going to just be a one-off thing.
Right.
So what happened was 18 months ago, I've been dyslexic all my life, although I didn't know that.
Can you explain to people what dyslexia
so
is?
sometimes people say, well, dyslexia can also be called word blindness.
Okay.
And it's the way in which the brain works makes it very difficult for my brain to process the written word, both when I hear it and when I see it.
Right.
And dyslexia is like anything, it affects people in different ways. Right. And what I had trouble doing was reading and writing when I was at school. Right. So at school I was called stupid and thick, and all sorts of things happened. Yeah. And after a while, when you're told this lots and lots, you believe it.
Yeah.
So it was only when I was in my late teens, early 20s, I realised that I was dyslexic, and even then that didn't really help. So what I did is I developed coping strategies that got me through being an entrepreneur and then through a PhD. Right. But I never told anyone. Right. And it was only 18 months ago I thought, I'm 55. I'm not looking for a promotion. No one's going to fire me. But I thought. But I thought, well, I'm going to tell. So I did a blog, and I just put it out, and I said, right, I'm going to blog once a week. Weekly about what it's like being an academic and being dyslexic. Yeah. Because it's a bit taboo as a subject. Yeah. And in a university, you don't expect to find dyslexic people.
No, because there's a lot of reading and writing.
So how did I survive? So the story was really about survival. Right the way from going to boarding school and finding it very difficult, because not only was I at boarding school at 8, I couldn't read and write and was struggling. So it was just sharing the challenges of my day-to-day life, but also how I cope with that. And as a result of doing that, lots of interesting things have happened. And I'm about to launch a social enterprise which is going to look at supporting dyslexic entrepreneurs with an entrepreneur who's dyslexic. Oh, wow. So I think we're going to do that for some really good reasons, but mainly to say, look, dyslexia is not a disability. We think, most people say, well, okay, it's a learning difference. It is, but we think it's a superpower. Nice. So what we're going to do is, it's going to be called probably the Superpower Institute. Right. And it's going to be all about bringing together entrepreneurs who are dyslexic and saying, look, you're not stupid and thick. You don't need to worry about this. We've got it, but we're saying it's a superpower. So what's your superpower? Right. And suddenly entrepreneurs realise they've got a superpower. I've got a superpower. I know what it is. And I meet other entrepreneurs and they begin to realise they know what the superpower is. And they will say, yeah, I'm not stupid thick. I've got a superpower. And that changes the worldview. Yeah. Yeah.
That's interesting. So can you tell us a little bit about the coping mechanisms as an entrepreneur who essentially has problems reading and writing? Yeah,
true. Well, I mean, I think I'm happy to talk about the coping mechanisms, but only if I can also talk about the superpower.
Please talk about the superpower.
So the thing about recognising this is that if you realise that this is a learning difference and that actually it gives you a special power, and actually thinking about what that special power is going to be different for different people. I can tell you what mine is, but I meet other entrepreneurs and say, oh, no, actually this is what I can do. But also then that gives me the confidence to say, right, I'm not stupid, I'm not thick. No. Therefore, if I got this support to enable me to engage with language, that could change things. So I use assistive technologies. So if I'm doing an email to you, Ethel, I would write an email using software that predicts words I might be as I'm typing them, a bit like when you're texting, but it actually has a list, and I can hear it if I hover over it, I drop it into the sentence, I construct my sentence, and then I highlight the text and it plays the text back. And I won't send you my email till I know it's perfect. Now that might mean that it takes me a lot longer to write to you than it is for you to respond to me. But I'm going to just take that on the chin, because I've always had to work hard to survive. So I just know that with this technology, I make fewer mistakes, I'm getting quicker, and my brain will learn new things. It just takes me longer to learn in my long-term memory the words. So words that caused me a problem when I was 16 don't cause me a problem anymore. So my brain is plastic enough to learn, but if I do it in a certain way, it makes it more embedded. It's like I've got to get that word into my long-term memory. So one of my nightmares is meeting somebody new who's got a name I've never heard before. Nightmare. It's all right with Ethel, but another word which is not familiar to me is very difficult. Don't ask me to spell it. So yeah. But my superpower is that as a result of being like this, to survive, I've had to be very resilient, because you've got to pick yourself up every time you're knocked down. So I'm resilient. I think I'm quite gregarious, because I've learned to mix and get involved with people. I use humour all the time, because humour deflects attention from me. It's a protective thing, but also it's protective. But it means that I've also had to think really quickly. So to spot the joke, you've got to think quick. So my brain is quick, think quick. But the other big thing, and this will be a surprise to your listeners maybe, is that it's quite difficult being dyslexic, and you can actually get quite sad about it, because you become quite isolated as a child. So I've had to deal with sadness from a very early age, which means that when I see someone who's sad, I recognise it immediately. I'm very empathic. So now
that helps in business.
Whoa, telling me. So as an entrepreneur, I can feel my customers' needs.
That's the superpower.
That is the superpower.
That's the superpower.
So if you can then, if you're an entrepreneur, you can say, well, I'm quite empathic. I can feel someone's needs. I can translate that, because I've got experience of business, into how my organisation could reconfigure to meet that need. Suddenly you've got a superpower. You can pick up a need, you can gather resources, you can articulate how we're going to do that. So what I find people do now is come to me with really complex problems. And I love the fact the world's full of problems, because I'm good at dealing with complex problems and articulating solutions in a way that other people say, oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, of course I can do that. We're one step nearer to solving the problem, meeting the customer need.
Okay, I'm going to ask one last question on the superpower, and then we will move back to sort of what you do on a daily basis. So now the obvious question here is, obviously being dyslexic in this environment, and Richard Branson is asked this.
That's right. Yeah,
he's also dyslexic. How do you grade papers? Just
how do I grade papers?
So papers and assignments.
This is a good question. Two things. One is my most recent module had 2 assignments. One was to produce a video pitch.
Nice. There we go.
That was easy.
Problem solved.
I watched the video pitch. I look at my scoring sheet and I think, that's bang, dead easy. The next one was an essay, 3,000-word essay. So, because of who I am and my workload doing lots of things, I was able to use PhDs to mark.
Sorted. Totally.
So what seems like a nightmare, and it was as a junior academic, you couldn't outsource. In effect, I outsourced the first marking. And then I look at a sample and think, oh, have they marked fairly? Does that seem right? And I can look at something. You could give me a report and you think, oh, this will get Nigel because there's loads of words in it. I will scan that report and I will come back and say, these are the 3 things it's trying to say. Now, I haven't read every single word. What I've done is I look for the salient points. And I've done it really quickly because look at me imagine me coming to me and saying, I found this cartoon in the newspaper. It's a really funny joke, Nigel. Read the joke. You'll really laugh. Right? Now, you're giving me something to read. And I'm already panicking. Mentally, my brain's shutting down. I've now got adrenaline flowing through my body. My processing of language is, and you're going to say you do it in a public place. Up goes the level. So you give me that, and I've got to work out the joke in a second. I can't read it quickly enough to work out the joke. So I probably pretend I understood the joke. Yeah, and I'll laugh. Yeah.
You did, all you needed was just like read it. It's funny, right? So
yeah.
Like, oh.
But for me, I just couldn't do, particularly if it was a complex joke, which is around the subtlety of words. Whoa.
Yeah.
So there are dangers out there all the time. So what I also do is I'm looking for danger all the time because you could approach me with a funny joke at any time, any place, anywhere.
Ethel with jokes. Ethel carrying her jokes.
So so you could embarrass me. I would be exposed in public. The worst nightmare. So I've got to think quickly. I'm looking at Ethel's coming with a joke, right? I've got to get ready to laugh spontaneously. You know what I mean? So I'm always doing that. So it means that that environment scanning means that you always look for the pattern. You're looking for patterns, and that's why if you gave me a big document, I could actually come back in a relatively short period of time, and you would say, "God, I read that twice and I didn't get that."
That's really good. It's an interesting just insight into. That's an interesting one.
And imagine if you're running an organisation and you really want creative people who think visually, spatially, then actually you might want some of these dyslexics. So maybe the next job advert you put at Ethel, you just say
wanted dyslexic. No, I think the problem, I suppose, with African and it's not detected quite quickly and kids get told for years. I mean, I look back now at a young lady I went to school with and I really think, because she could do the math. I used to remember thinking she could do math. She just couldn't.
And that educational system, just like in the UK, will have destroyed her. So there are and 1 in 10 people with dyslexia of some degree. And many could cope at school. I'm here.
You're a professor.
I'm here.
You're a PhD, so clearly
I survived.
You survived.
But you see, it's funny because you say, oh wow, Nigel, successful entrepreneur turned professor. Wow. I think I'm not very good. Do you know what I mean? Because it's been drilled into me for so long.
It's just the same voices you hear over and over again in your head.
Maybe that's why I work hard, because I've got to prove a point.
So, but how was the blog just taken? Did people email you? People reach out? Was that like a really good?
It was good. It was good. It was cathartic for me because every week I had a chance to talk about how things were going and get more and more passionate about the superpower, which I didn't know about at the beginning. So it was a big year for me. I mean, to give you an example, on what day are we now? We're Thursday today. So on Monday, I received an email from a student in America who's doing a degree in history and really wants to do a PhD, but she's profoundly dyslexic. And she said, I read your blog and I realised I could do it. And I emailed back and said, of course you can do it. Well done. Congratulations, you've got dyslexia. What's your superpower?
Love that.
And she's saying, right, I'm going to get my PhD in history. And I said, history needs people like you, who are visual thinkers, can take the big view and explain it. So go for it. So that's one example. So you could say it's one life that's been influenced positively. And I've had loads of emails like that. So I think go for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's really good. Right. Let's talk about your day to day. So being the director of entrepreneurship means you run entrepreneurship models, but also you run Recirculate. So do you get to work with a lot of entrepreneurs or upcoming entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I do. So I suppose it's worth saying that most people think that being an academic is about doing lectures, and then when you've done your lecture, you do writing, you don't want anyone to speak to you. Yeah. So that's what people think. Yeah. And
there are lots of people that actually prefer that life.
Yeah. So that's not me. What I do is I really like my teaching, so that's why I've written a book on entrepreneurship for teaching.
Wait, can I find it?
Yeah, it's just there. And it's written with two colleagues, so... Yeah.
Hold on a minute. So this is Nigel's book on entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Cool.
So what's really good about the book, he says modestly, is it's written with other people, and the bit that I focus on is the first half of the book, which is about how you set up a new venture. From the sort of ideation, vision, right the way through to opportunity recognition, markets, all things like that. It's a bit of a step by step, but it's also quite reflective, and it's designed to be used in a university environment, probably at master's level or year 3 final year student. And I wrote the book because I couldn't really find a book that would help me, and I also wanted to incorporate a particular type of teaching which I've really enjoyed doing, my students have really enjoyed, and that's called critical incident. So in this example, let's say you were the person, I would interview you in front of the students, and we'd have already talked before the interview, and we'd have decided when you had a critical moment in your business career, and it might be when you're thinking about which market should I export to, or how do I decide of these 3 business ideas which I should work on. And so we'd have already had that conversation, and I would link it to the chapter we were talking about, and you would have said to me, look, there were really 3 options at that moment. So I said, what we'll do is we'll pretend that you've got those 3 options and you haven't decided. Okay, and it's always got to be something you've already done, so you can then do what happened. So then I would say, Ethel, you were telling me about this new business idea you've got 3, and tell me about them, and you'd say blah blah blah, and you'd then say to the students, well, I've got 3 options. I can do this one, or do that one, or do that, whatever it might be. And you'd say, and I'd say to the students, right, well, you've heard Ethel talk about this. Before you vote, what questions would you like to ask Ethel? So they've already done this before, so they think, great, Ethel's not seen it before. Really, they'd ask you also, what's your margin, what's your market, what's your history, who do you know? Because we've been talking about business models in class. And then I'd say, okay, that's enough questions, everyone vote. And we'd do a vote. Yeah, and then you would say, I'd say, well, Ethel, what did you really do? And you'd say, well, I did option B. And half the students would groan because they didn't get it, and half would throw their books in the air. And then we'd say, well, why did you make that decision? Because all 3 were plausible. And so that type of learning, it's not learning through your own experience, because you can't do that in a university often. It's learning directly from an entrepreneur. So I incorporated that feature into the book by doing video interviews. Setting this up, and so every chapter has a different entrepreneur with a challenge, and it's been a really useful. So my teaching is drawn on that experience. So I teach, I do research. So Recirculate, which is around the water economy in West Africa, is bigger than that. It's actually how do universities in West Africa contribute to economic and social development, particularly in the area of water. But my interest is how universities in industry and SMEs and small businesses work together to solve big problems. So I do think that about. I also research other things, how people learn entrepreneurship, how the use of CRM assistance by small firms. I've researched that. So I do research.
Where's the paper on that? So my company, Dawn Technologies, has a CRM. We have a.
Well, we were just. I was always. It was looking particularly at the use of social media in hotels. So we did the project in Spain because there's a lot of hotels in Spain. Social media is important. So we were just looking at what's the model of successful use of CRM, because many people spend money on CRM. But they don't get the value. So we were looking at that, and it was quite interesting. And effectively, we were saying that apart from TripAdvisor, TripAdvisor is you must do TripAdvisor and you must do it well.
Right.
Yeah, full stop.
Yeah.
The other thing
TripAdvisor is
it's ubiquitous.
It's a page you can book. You can look at ratings. You can book a hotel.
It's a peer review site.
It's a peer review site for.
And it's global, and the thing about it is that unless you're simply not going to be successful as a hotel unless you nail it. So that was fine. Everyone knew that anyway. But I think what we were then saying is, look, if you are going to be where we can see evidence of successful use of CRM, so things like Facebook and other things than TripAdvisor, actually you need to invest in the training of understanding how that technology can contribute to value as perceived by your customer. So it was really saying, look, it's not good enough to just learn how to use Facebook. You've got to actually invest in your staff and help them to see the connection on how Facebook adds value to the relationship with your customer and where it doesn't. So it was saying, look, before you can be successful, you must invest in building the capability in your organization to understand that connection. It's not just a technology piece, it's an understanding relationships. It's not like TripAdvisor. You've got to actually invest in your people in that way so they can make those connections.
Great.
Yeah.
Right. I'm going to ask one last question because we've had a long day. How long? Almost done half an hour.
I know. It's nearly time to go. Yeah.
It's time to go home.
It's been a long time.
Right. So, say your students, one of your students came to you and say they have an idea. They want to start a business. What would you advise in terms of just two areas? So it's very specific, two areas. Defining and developing the product idea, but also on the sales side of it. Yeah.
So it's an easy question for me to answer. It's because students ask me a lot, and not just students, but I work a lot with entrepreneurs, and so they will ask me, I've got this good idea, and I'll say, have you? And they'll say yes, and I'll say, and so
everybody's the billion.
That's right. They have. So I say, well, let's keep it simple because I'm a simple Yorkshireman. so let's just keep it simple. Tell me about the value that your idea provides your customer. We're now talking about a word we would know very well, which is around proposition. What's your value proposition? So I'd say, well, how does that add value to your customer? And they'll say, well, I think. No. And I say, no. I know you think it has value, otherwise you wouldn't be here. But how have you determined your customer or potential customer sees value? And often they will say, well, I've not asked any. So I'll say, well, wouldn't it be a good idea to go and ask some of your customers? And they would tell you, not me, they'll tell you. So then you might find someone who says, oh no, actually, I do know there's value because I used to run a shop, and when I was running the shop, it was so difficult to do such and such. So I know that if I provided that service to people who have a shop that were like me, they would say, yeah, I understand the need. And of course, you'll come across this all the time. Entrepreneurs often have a deep knowledge of their industry. So they know what it's like. And if they're dyslexic entrepreneurs, they'll have nailed it. So they will know the value, and therefore they can say to me, oh yes, Nigel, the value of this idea to the customer is this. And I'll think, oh, that's pretty good. So to me, get your proposition right. Know that your customer can see that value as well. And then we go to step 2, and we then start working through that step. So get the value proposition right, articulate it. And I always say, you've got a company name, use it. Add 7 words to that company name, and that should mean that I could meet you and you could tell me that company name, the 7 words, and I'd understand what your proposition is.
So okay, let's say that slowly. So use your company name, add 7 words to it, and that should really tell me what your company does and how it adds value
to me as a customer.
To me as a customer. Yeah, brilliant. I'm going to use that.
So let's say my company name was Magic Cups. Just because I've seen your cup, and I'll say Magic Cups. And what my company does is it prints really interesting things on mugs.
Right.
That's one of it. So I would say, well, my name of the company is Magic Mugs, so I don't need to use the word magic or mugs. And then I would say, right, so what I've really got to do is to get across the value of printing on that.
Right.
So I would say,
what's the value to
putting your company's brand in the hand of your customer.
Right.
Yeah.
Magic cups.
So I would be saying, let's say my 7 words be putting your brand in your customer's hand. Yeah, I've only used 4 words there. So I could, if we had more time, we'd think about this.
Right.
And suddenly would people say, oh, so what you're saying is what's magic about your cups is that as I'm doing this, I can read the word. And what if I had a little thing here which changed colour with the temperature? And so what was magic is that my cup moved from being simply a cup, but actually a really dynamic branding tool. So I would say, fine, that's interesting. I see what you're trying to do. So then we would go on to the next stage, which would be, I would say, I understand the value. So I'd say, okay, that's really great. Well done. That's fantastic. And you spoke to customers and everything. So I'd say, well, okay, who's involved in the business? Right. You'd say, oh, it's just me. And I said, oh, that's interesting. Why is it just you? And we'd have a conversation. And then you'd start to say, well, it's not just me, because my sister's doing this and my brother's doing that, and I've got this friend who does this. I say, so it's not really just you. Tell me about this network you've got. Who's in the company? Who's outside? How's it going to help you? Why have you got them? What don't you know? Do you know somebody who knows that? So then it would make them start thinking, oh yeah, I'm not on my own. But I've got to manage this network. Right. So we go from sort of what's the proposition, who are the people involved, and then we'll talk about things like, well, markets. I'll say, where are you going to sell this? And that's their clue to say, it's a global product. I need 0.11% of the world's market, and I'm a millionaire.
And I'm a millionaire.
Yeah.
It's
and I say,
it's a
$10
trillion market. If I get only less 0.1% of a $10 trillion market, that would be. I would be a millionaire.
Yeah. So you've heard that before.
So many times.
So I would say that's very interesting and optimistic of you. Talk to me about your first customer.
Right.
And they'll say, what do you mean? I said, well, they've just walked in. What do they look like? Where have they come from? What they're doing? What they're wearing? What car do they drive? What do they do? And they'll say, oh, and then the penny will drop. And they'll start to talk about the customer, the first customer. Right. Oh, well, they're running a small company and they're in retail, and what they're finding is they've got this great product but they can't reach their customer. And I say, great, so that's not what you just described. Now you're talking about it. So we'll start talking about really what are the needs, why should they spend money on your magic mug and not do something else like buy a leaflet? Yeah. So we'll start unpicking that. So then they're talking about the customer. And then I'll say, great, that's good. So who might be offering them another mug? So now we're talking about competition. So before we know it, they've given the proposition, who's involved, they've talked about the marketplace, who their customer is, they begin to segment their customer, and now they're talking about the competition. And now we're going back and they're saying, oh, that's a good point. I'm going to change that word in my proposition because I think I need to be slightly different. And then my couple of final questions would be, well, what are you going to be really good at? Because if you did it just the same as everyone else, you're not going to beat the competition. Yeah. So tell me one thing you're going to do better at than anyone else. And they'll say, well, whatever. And if it's price, I'll say, oh, come on.
Everybody can
come on. Somebody's going to be cheaper.
Somebody's going to be cheaper. Yeah. There's I forget who says if you compete on price, you could be unlucky and actually win. That is a magic word. So then we've done so it's not price. So now you might say, well, I can manufacture these at a higher quality, or I can manufacture them quicker, or I can get a different, because my ink changes colour with temperature, I've got a USP. And now they're thinking about... Or it could be, I know a lot of people that run companies and I can get them.
I'm really good at, I've got a huge network.
I've got a huge network.
I've got access.
So
then that becomes, right, so if that's your sort of, key process, we would call it core competence or something. Then of course you need to look after that and polish it and make it better and do it better and keep an eye on what your competitors are doing. So that's good. Then I'll say, well, why are you doing this? and they'll say to make loads of money. And I say, that's fine, but why else are you doing it? And then we'll start talking about social value. We'll also then, I'll say, well, okay, you've just said that you're going to make loads of money, so you're going to measure the money. What else could you measure that would tell you you're doing a good job? And then that will start making them think about, well, I could measure how many customers are totally satisfied with the product when it arrives. So I would say, well, how would you know that? Well, by the return. So I'm now going to measure the returns each week, and I'm going to plot it on a graph. So they're now thinking about not just money, but something that would tell them they're doing a good job.
Yeah.
So I would say, for me, that's about what's your proposition, what people are involved, what place, what market, what's the key processes, and why are you doing it? So the profit.
Right. That's absolutely great. That could just be the podcast, just that. Literally, the maybe what we might do is come back and sit with you with Women in Tech and
yeah, I think we do.
and go through that process.
There's one bit I haven't told you.
Right.
This isn't magic. It's just the way I think. Is that I would say that's really great, Ethel. You've thought about this. You've got your business model really. Wow, that's really impressive. But I would warn you that as soon as you go to market, the market will tell you to change. So be ready to change. Yeah. So whatever you've just told to me is just your go-to market. Yeah. And then change it. Right. And be ready to do that all your life. Right. But I would then say, well, okay, it's a really good idea. But of course, why is it a good idea right now? Right here. So I'd want you to begin to tell me what's changing in the world. You might say, well, the thing is, Nigel, nobody's got time to look at social media anymore. People are always drinking cups of tea where I'm from, and actually I know that this is the right moment for this. And the real driver is something. And it might be what I'm going to launch is something, it's because of the price of oil, it might be to do with the aging population. So often things outside your control will drive the market to growth. Yeah? So that would be the other thing I'd really want, is to get a sense of either really deep knowledge of a market, which you can be a driver, like personal knowledge, but also are there things changing? And often there are. It could be legislation, it could be technology, it could be social, it could be commercial. And these drivers are often totally outside your control, but make the opportunity right now important.
That's brilliant, Nigel. Thank you so much. There's so much, which is why I'm hanging out in Lancaster with them. It's been a long day. We've been
telling me.
We've been out and about. I have a few videos on that. We went to see a glass factory, a crystal making factory. Lead crystal, and we went to see an art and craft house. Yeah. And then we also went to see they make playground equipment, and they're like a big playground equipment person, and so it's been a long day. Thank you, Nigel, so much for being on Relevant Conversations.
Very, very nice.
I'm probably going to post this in about 3 or 4 weeks, just because there's a backlog of other videos. There's a backlog of other
But we're going to work together again, I'm sure. It feels like it, doesn't it?
It feels like it. It's been a good time in Lancaster. I think there is a lot of opportunity for us to...
Well, it's been a pleasure to meet you again.
Yes.
So this is the second time.
This is the second time.
And the third time will be even more interesting.
Yes, sure. we will be changing the world together.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. All right, guys. Thank you so much for your time. And look him up. How do you find your social media channels?
NigelLockett.com.
NigelLockett.com on Twitter.
Yeah, at Nigel Lockett.
At Nigel Lockett. Lockett with a C-K-E-T-T or one T?
K-E-T-T.
Sorry. K-E-T-T. Yeah. Okay. So see you guys soon.